Many of you has been asking me about growing up in Saudi Arabia and whether Saudi Arabia today is the Saudi Arabia I lived through in the 70s and in the 80s. So I decided today, since this is a storytelling, to shed some light on my Saudi Arabian life as somebody who is Jordanian Palestinian child born in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, which is the west coast of the Arabian Peninsula. And to bottom line with Saudi, every time I reflect on my experience or reflect on my memories, it's a very bittersweet memories, because I need to explain one concept. I'm not sure if that's the case in Saudi these days. I'm not sure whether the laws or the policies have changed since I left. Remember, I left in 1988. So back in the 70s and in the 80s, if you are not a Saudi national, you are considered a second-class citizen. What does that mean is that you don't have the same privileges, the same benefits, and the same opportunities that is a Saudi national has. And I think, or I believe, since it was explained to me when I started to question why the country should be more tolerant and more accepting to other nationalities and to be inclusive and give them the equal rights and civil liberties that the Saudi citizens indulge in. And the explanation that I got is that since that country was unified, I think, if I'm not mistaken, after World War I, they needed a lot of professionals to help them build the country and elevate the lifestyle to catch up with the rest of the world. So because of that, they practiced the law or practiced the regulations that says, you know, we need you to come in to the country to train and educate our citizens and have our citizens hopefully apply themselves enough to advance the country. As simple as oil discovery. When oil was discovered by coincidence, I'm not sure if that's true or not, Saudi Arabia did not have any of the engineering qualification or standards to pump that oil, refine it, produce it, and export it. So, of course, the only option was for Saudi is to hire and recruit as many professionals as possible from, you know, oil drillers, mechanics, all the way up to chemical engineers, material science engineers, and they paid very, very well. But that's where your rights and civil liberties basically ends, at the employment transactional relationship. So my parents came to Saudi in 1967. And the reason my parents ended up in Saudi, as I said, Saudi had the employment doors open to any foreigner that is ready to be contracted or employed in Saudi Arabia. depending on the market need for that specific profession. So it happened in stages. I think the wave we entered through Saudi Arabia was more the educational system. My mom was a teacher, and they needed at that time so many different teachers, so many academics to build the education system in Saudi Arabia, figuring out that if we get our citizens highly educated, they'll be able, of course, to serve the country and their community. So my mom was a high school science and math teacher. And honestly, they left Jordan by default because in the mid 60s, late 50s, mid 60s, there was a huge movement by the Ba'ath Party. And Al-Ba'ath basically targeted high schools and university campuses to promote their narrative and their movement. So, of course, my parents, as very young citizens, wanted equal liberty, civil rights, inclusivity, tolerance, and that's what the Ba'ath Party advertised for and called for. So in Jordan, there was a turmoil, demonstration on campuses. Young professionals got caught into it. So my dad, allegedly, that's the story he told me. It could be fabricated or it could be exaggerated. I'm not sure. Unfortunately, I can't ask him. And even when I ask him, he'll tell me the same story because he passed away in 2014. Allah yarhamu yahsin ilayh. But the way he described it to me, he said when he came back from Egypt after his college years, and he was in a cafe, and he just got married to my mom, and he was in a cafe with a couple of friends, and they were just chit-chatting about the future of Jordan. Of course, the Ba'ath movement was very new, and everybody was jumping on that bandwagon because they just wanted change. The young professionals, the young artists, the young academics, they just wanted something different, and they were thirsty for something different than just the monarchy in Jordan. So one of his cousins got arrested in one of the demonstrations, and I guess the guy who interrogated that cousin was one of my dad's best friends. So he heard my dad kind of got tangled in the discussion of a Ba'ath Party and what would be the future of the monarchy in Jordan. And he sat him down and told him that if you are not careful and if you get arrested, I know you are connected, but there is so much of your connection I can use to pardon you. So my dad, I guess, told him, well, what am I supposed to do? This is my country. Are you asking me to leave? He said, listen, I'll get you and your wife a contract, 5-year contract, to go and work and live in Saudi Arabia and let things cool down. And you're more than welcome to come back after 5 years. What's the worst thing could possibly happen? You're not going to change. You're not going to forget your country in 5 years. So fast forward, we stayed in Saudi 19. I stayed in Saudi 19 years. I was born 1968 and I left 1988. So about 20 years in Saudi. And I'm one of 5. We are all born in Saudi Arabia. My dad, as a egalitarian artist, because he was a writer, and he wanted always to be a writer, he had to put all his plans, ambitions, and dreams on the back burner in order to support his family. So my mom got approved as a teacher for high school in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, which is the holy place in Saudi. But somehow her papers got switched and they ended up in Jeddah. Now, Mecca and Jeddah, they're both on the West Coast, but Mecca is the center of the Wahhabism Islam. And I can't even imagine growing up in Mecca. Mecca was very ancient town, very, very conservative. And Mecca has still the vibes of the Qurayshi Bedouin tradition too. Jeddah was almost the escape Vegas for the West Coast. You have the beaches, you have the wealth, you have the restaurants. There were outdoor movie theaters for non-Saudis. But every activity that we did, it was always with non-Saudis, and it was always with families that we identify with, leaving home, seeking employment. It was good money. And remember, our money, I'm not sure about now, it was tax free. So we can send as much money back home without being or paying the penalty of taxes in Saudi, because Saudi told us we don't need to charge you taxes. We got oil money, and that's plenty for us. So my mom ended up in Jeddah teaching for a private school, all girls school of math and science. And she did that for about 10 years. I think she stopped, yes, when she started to try to have more children. When my sister was born, I was 10 years old. So that's when she stopped, and she was a homemaker for a while after number 5 was born. And then a couple of years later, she went back into the academic scene again. So my dad agreed and said that, okay, what's the worst can happen? We can try it for 5 years. And like I said, my mom thrived in the Saudi society because it just matched her belief system of the traditional tribal connection. She didn't feel like she needed to acclimate or simulate. It was very similar to how she grew up, and she loved living through that kind of Bedouin connection. My dad struggled, but obviously as a young man, 25 to 26 years old, he just didn't bother to sit down and analyze it and go through the adaptation process. He just was focusing on trying to have, and me trying to have enough income to support his family, because immigration is immigration, right? You leave everybody that you love and everything that you know in order to survive. So when his best friend gave him the ultimatum, he said, well, I don't want to run. I don't want to be a fugitive kind of running away from the belief system that I have created and all the values that I think will benefit me as a Jordanian. But unfortunately, reality had a different sense of humor or a different plan for him. So according to my dad, he landed in Saudi with only $10 in his pocket. And he used to tell me they rented a hotel room for a week or so. And then they found 1-bedroom apartment, and they bought a very tiny square dining room with 2 chairs, 2 plates, 2 spoons, 2 cups. Until they get their first paycheck, and then they built on that. They had number 1 and me number 2 in that apartment. That was their second apartment. And they had number 3 in the third apartment. And then we rented a house in Saudi for number 4 and number 5. And then my dad built his forever home in Jeddah. That's when I was in high school. And then I left in 1988. So when I say it's bittersweet experience, because it was constantly a tug of war between the identity of us living in Saudi Arabia as children. That's all we knew, and we considered it home, but it wasn't home. So my parents, just like all immigrant parents, they tried really hard to keep the connection with Jordan by taking us in the summertime to vacation there, and mingle and meet our family and our cousins, and just to keep that lifeline connected with Jordan. But something happened. So my mom's sister married into the second tier of the royal family, Al Sudairi family. And when that happened, our social status got elevated a little bit with that marital connection. And what that meant is it opened, or it offered us, some social privileges, not educational privileges, not enterprise privileges. We were still a second-class citizens, but we were an elevated second-class citizens. To a certain point, there was always limitation. There's always restrictions. So Saudi in the 70s and the 80s, women couldn't drive. Now women can drive. I'm not sure about if people need to pay taxes in Saudi now. I'm not sure about that, but we didn't. Everything had to happen in secrecy and behind the scenes, in a sense that if we would go to a beach, it has to be at somebody's house, beach house. So we are protected and hidden as far as activities, going in the water with our swimsuits. There was alcohol behind the scene, barbecue parties. It was, women and men and kids running around, jet skis, motorcycles, women driving in Volkswagen Bug cars on the beach, just to get some kind of a break from the social restrictions and the cultural restrictions that Saudi Arabia had mandated. Things were simpler, just like anywhere in the world in the 70s and the 80s, in a sense that there was no computers, there was no cell phones, there was no social media. So you can conduct a very private and luxurious life, and nobody would know what you've done yesterday. So because of the discreet and respect to your private life, and basically the government was, I'm not sure about now again, in my days, the government attitude was like, you can do whatever you want as long as we don't find out. If you don't get caught, you can get away with a lot of things. But now I hear the country is so open. They have concerts in Riyadh, which is mind-blowing. Riyadh is the center of the Wahhabism way of life. And now they have like rave concerts and open malls. Women can drive. So good for them, because you have to keep up with the time. Like I said, when Saudi Arabia was unified was after World War I. The Western world was advancing too, and Saudi Arabia had a lot to catch up. So that's why they recruited a huge influx of professionals, academics, to just try to make up for the lost time that Saudi Arabia was busy trying to unify the country. as a child growing up in Saudi Arabia, to a certain age, it was so, and I don't know whether this is going to come across as very contradictory. It was very free, spiritually free. Like I said, as long as we did everything, we went to the beach, we enjoyed the swimming, barbecuing, music. My dad smoked; he drank his Jack Daniels. I hear now alcohol is allowed. Before, alcohol was forbidden. And because of my dad's connections, he was able to get his hands on the alcohol and even his hands on VHS cassettes that had all the Disney movies, all the American movies, Star Wars, Star Trek, all the sci-fi, classics that I watched in Saudi Arabia, because he had a friend in New York City that used to tape all these TV shows and send them to us. And of course, if anybody else without my dad's connections, they would be stopped at the customs, destroyed, watched by customs, deleted by customs. But again, because of our connections, our connection vouched for my dad, and my dad was, able to get some of that American lifestyle into our household. So us as children did not feel we're so disconnected from the Western world. I believe my parents, deep inside, they knew that we were going to end up somewhere in the West, whether the United States or Europe, because they took us to Europe all the time. My first memory of being in Europe was, I remember the first time we went to Germany and to London. And my dad, like I said, as a very, very liberal, with a very liberal mindset, loved Europe and identified with Europe more than he identified with the United States. I don't think he understood the United States very well. And he felt like maybe it's too far geographically from everything else. And he wanted constantly to be half in and half out, from Jordan being his family, being his country, and then being in Europe. He just liked the European lifestyle a lot more. He thought that maybe the American lifestyle was too extreme. European lifestyle was a little bit more rich in culture and the arts, and he respected the history. And as Jordanians, we respect ancient history, ancient civilization. We identify with ageless cultures. Where the United States was a new world for him, he did not, like I said, understand it. I don't think he understood even the politics of it like he understood the European history and politics, because of the education system in Jordan. A lot of it was British. So, but he wanted us, and I couldn't understand why he would incorporate the American culture in our, entertainment. We knew McDonald's and Burger King advertisements more than anything else. We used to sing all these songs. We knew the cornflakes, all the commercials, the tagline of all the American commercials by heart. But yet we vacationed in Europe. So in a sense, that was, I think, beautiful, because we got to mentally and emotionally adapt or prepare for what the American lifestyle or the American culture would be. But at the same time, we got the taste of the European heritage, the arts and culture of Europe. For example, my first memory attending opera was 5 years old. I was in Vienna, And I remember I fell asleep and my dad got so upset, but I'm 5. So they had really high expectations from us to be well cultured and well informed of arts and culture. And I've been visiting museums since even I could remember. So museums, art, music. I played the violin. I played the piano. And that was all available in Saudi, but it was done behind the scenes. There was no official resources or advertisement for, oh, if you want your daughter to learn piano, come over. There's a music center that you can actually enroll her in. There was no such thing. So believe it or not, my piano teacher was from Egypt, and Ustaz Ramzi, and he had a really, I believe now, knowing what I know now, he used to scare me because his eyes would be bulged out, and I always wondered how but he was an amazing, brilliant pianist. Then we found out he passed away from high blood pressure. I think he had thyroid condition. He was blonde. He was fair skinned. He looked French than Egyptian. And I always remember sitting next to him, playing the keys, and he had a very sad aura about him. And don't ask me why. Since I was a kid, I'm so in touch with people's frequencies and vibes. And he was very sad. He was very quiet. He was very introverted. And I will play, follow his lead, play the steps and stuff. And I look up at him, and he won't say anything. He just had that sad persona about him. Maybe he never got to practice as an artist or play in recitals, or maybe he had bigger dreams than just being a music teacher. And unfortunately, circumstances were not generous to him, that he ended up with, by default, displace himself and end up in Saudi Arabia. And then I stopped the piano, I think, I don't know, 5th grade. Then I picked up violin in middle school or high school. And my violin teacher was an American. He was an engineer, but he did music lessons on the side. And my mom knew his wife because she was the music teacher at the elementary school that my mom ended up working as a principal to. And she told her, my daughter is really interesting. I mean, I just bought her a violin. She wants to learn a violin. So he used to come over the weekends, and I took my violin with me after I left Saudi to come to the United States, but I was just too busy with college here in the States. I had to drop the violin. But my sister played the piano, and my sister played the cello for a while, I believe. But her piano teacher was my mom's best friend, the Armenian Lebanese husband, who was also an engineer, and he was her piano teacher. So that was nice because we used to get together for dinner, and then she'll get her piano lessons. And we end up in the pool, all the kids, afterwards. So that was a sweet memory. It was very wholesome. It was happy. It was free from responsibilities and restrictions. And I think my parents did a really good job trying to build and create that kind of environment, unlimited, restriction-free environment for us, because, we were in Saudi 9, months of the year, and then we'd just have summer break, because there was not a whole lot. There's holidays or breaks, school breaks, except for Eid al-Kibir, Eid al-Saghir, so Eid al-Fitr, Eid al-Adha, which are the religious holidays after Ramadan and after pilgrimage. And those are just for 3 days. So, and depending when that holiday lands, whether we'll have an opportunity to take off for a week or not. I remember one time the holiday landed in December, and my dad just flew all of us, and we went to Tunisia. And my dad left North Africa. He, grew up in Egypt and finished his education in Egypt in full. And he's been to Morocco with my mom, but he wanted to go to Tunisia. He had a really, really good friend, a writer that was supposed to help him publish some of his books when he started to get into writing again. So we went to Tunis. Tunis was amazing. The food was very similar to Jordan, but in a sense that it was very North African flavors too that I never, tried before. So that was very exotic experience for me. But it was the first time I rode a horse in Tunis, and we used to ride them on the beach without a saddle. And I was probably 11, 12 years old. And what an experience. I never felt so liberated in my life than being on a horse on the beach. And I just took to horses, and I rode horses in every chance that I got. So again, that's one of the sweet memories that I had. And now as an adult, I really appreciate what my dad and my mom try to give us and try to expose us to, so we are not growing up with such a limited conservative mindset, to be more tolerant to other cultures, to be accepting to different societies. Knowing is growing. I always have said that. And I think that's very important to expose our children to as many cultures as possible, for them to learn how to, be competent in adapting different cultures, or understanding or relating to different cultures, and have that multicultural adaptability too, because anything can happen. Anything can happen, and forces you to displace yourself, or you might end up not being satisfied with your life in the world right now, especially with all the technology we have in the social media. We are so connected all the time, and the world is becoming a much smaller place than when I was growing up. So, we used maps, phones, you had to drive everywhere. Everything was paper, forms. You had to wait, and you needed to be very, very patient person in order to survive in that world, my world, back in the day. Now everything is so fast. You are achieving much more tasks in a very, very short time. We are constantly connected. We are constantly communicating. We are constantly in the know. So whether that's good or bad, I'm not sure. I think with just like everything in life, if you abuse it and you play upon it above and beyond its limit, it can become something that might fire back at you. And like I said, if you abuse your strength, it becomes your weakness. So my frustrations with the Saudi culture started probably when I was 14, 15, when I started high school, because that was the time when I had to start planning for the future. Before that, I was under the umbrella of my parents. I went along with what my parents did. I spoke to the people that my parents socialized with. I followed the leader. And then high school came. And I remember I struggled in school for the first time in my life, 8th grade. Something happened. I'm not sure if I was burned out, I was tired of school, or maybe tired of the almost like OCD culture. The culture was so structured that my interests started to change, and I discovered my tendencies to plan ahead and had to have a plan and design and create my life. I went through like an identity crisis, and I started to ask myself and ask my parents, who am I in the world? I'm Jordanian Palestinian. I have Jordanian citizenship, but I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia. I identify with the Saudi lifestyle because that's all I know. Jordan was just a summer hub for me. I was a tourist. I was a guest. Yeah, I connected and I got to meet my extended family, but I was a lot more vested in the life of my first cousins, who they were Saudi, and they had much more privileges, much more rights than I did. So in a sense, I realize the civil liberty segregation between me and my cousins. They could be whoever they want to be, and the country would support them. I was limited because I was still a second-class citizen. And my parents tried really hard to shelter us from getting to this realization as long as they could. But as you become more and more educated about life and history and society, you start to make your own revelations and your own conclusions. You reach your own conclusions. And then I realized one day, and I think that's what my first struggle, I remember I had a panic attack at school. I think it was in 8th grade. And they called my mom, and my mom sat me down, and she couldn't really understand what the panic is about. I just felt I'm in limbo between two societies. Who am I? Identity confusion. Where am I going to end up? I didn't want to be in Jordan. I don't want to just get married and settle in Saudi because that's what my cousins are doing. And I would talk to my mom, and my mom would just sugarcoat it. And she used to calm me down and tell me, don't be hard on yourself. You got a couple of years to figure this out and a couple of years to decide. My dad was more an advocate for, way to go, kid. You got to figure this out on your own. I agree with you 100%. This is not your home. This is not your final destination. You need to pave your own way. You need to create your own destiny. There is Saudi Arabia and there is the rest of the world. So he was like, yes, he was very like revolutionary as far as create your own path, create your own destiny, create your own future. Saudi and Jordan is not the rest of the world kind of thing. So he really was leading and advocating for an unlimited mindset, because he told me if you limit yourself, then you literally will shackle yourself in one way of thinking. And that's torture to your spirit, and that torture to your mind. So I would go talk to my mom. My mom said, okay, give yourself a chance. There's still a couple of years. You got plenty of time to plan. And then I go talk to my dad. My dad's like, no, I agree with you. You should plan. This is not your home. I'd be like, what is going on? A lot of confusion, a lot of cleaning the attic kind of thing. Everything that I knew that was real, it wasn't real for me. It was real for the Saudi. So I had to almost kind of go back to the design table and redesign what I believe in, what are my values, do I believe I should stay, do I believe that I should submit to the traditional gender role expectations, do I believe that this is it, do I believe that this is the best I could do I believe in submission to the cultural, societal pressures, like I said, expectations, or do I just walk away from it all, create what I think is best for me? But also, when you're in high school, you don't know what's best for you because you don't have the experience. There are certain aspects of Saudi life that I do miss. I miss the culture, the Arabian culture of just existing and not worry too much about money and not worry about achievements. And maybe because I am now settling down, and I am in a place in my life that, okay, I've done what I came here to do. Now what? The dust is settling, and I achieved pretty much everything that I wanted to achieve, and even more. Certain things that I've achieved, I never thought that I would ever stumble on. So I believe I miss the simple life, and I don't know how to describe it. I miss how the air smells. And I mentioned that in my episode where I spoke about my experience in Egypt. The moment I walked out of the airport, Cairo airport, into the open air, I start crying immediately because that's the smell that I missed. I don't know what is it all about, but there is a certain mystical scent about our air. This might sound loony, but I've spoken to a lot of immigrants that they agree with me. When you go home, back to our home world, it smells very different. Of course, atmospherically it does, because the chemicals are different and the atmosphere is different and the geography is different, and it will contribute to the way the air smells. But it was very nostalgic and melancholy, to the point that I really got emotional. And every time I go through a stressful moment or hectic days or a lot of pressure coming from every single direction, I try to close my eyes and try really, really hard to relive that mystical scent of the air. But I miss the people that I met in Saudi. We were all together in the same boat. We supported each other as a second class citizen, or residents, I should say, because you're not a citizen, residents in Saudi Arabia. I felt most comfortable when I spoke to them, and we played, and we had play date with them, dinners, we visited each other, we swam in each other's pools, and it was an identity confirmation for me, because see, they're going through the same thing. I'm not suffering alone. And we used to exchange ideas. So what are you going to do when you grow up? What are you going to do when you finish school? Are you going to go back home to Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Egypt? what's going to happen? And we'll exchange ideas. And of course, as high school students, we listen to each other more than we listen to our parents. And I used to come home with different ideas. This is what I want to do. And my mom was like, no, you're not going to do that. And I definitely missed those days. But again, 70s and the 80s, Saudi Arabia was a lot more simpler. The whole world was simpler than what it is today. And I'm very grateful and fortunate that I had to experience Saudi in its most primitive, pioneering environment as it was in the 70s and the 80s. I hear that these days it's very westernized. It is very open to everything and anything. And that is really crazy. And it's hard for me to wrap my head around it because that's not the Saudi Arabia that I've known. And unfortunately, did not keep up with my connection to my first cousins in Saudi. And I would love to talk to them and see, because they're very private since they're part of the royal family. So it's not really easy for me to reach out to them and just call them. I might, I'm not sure. I would love to pick their brain as far as how they are living in Saudi, how much Saudi have changed for them. But looking back, I know my parents ended up there by default, and they were supposed to only be there for 5 years. My dad build something out of nothing there, and I really admire that about him. But it was sad that he could not go back to Jordan because of his writings, and it was too much tension and pressure. And he had to follow his kids here in the United States. But I never thought my dad would have ever ending up being buried here in the States. And that's one of the sad parts about immigration, that, my father-in-law is buried in New Hampshire, my mother-in-law is buried in New Jersey, my dad is buried in Colorado. You never end up going home. We never end up going back to your home world. And I wonder what they think about that right now, since the Islamic customs, we bury within 24 hours. So if you do not end up taking your last breath in your home world, we have to bury right away. So they passed away where they passed away, and they just scattered all over. I'm sure my in-laws would have loved to be buried back in Egypt, from Mansoura, which is the northeast of the Delta, in Egypt with their ancestors. I'm pretty sure that my dad would have wanted to be buried in a salt in Jordan. And I know my mom, she's going to end up here too, because she is, in a nursing home here. But that is sad. And I usually tell my husband's like, I don't want to do that. I want to be buried back home. I don't care if it's Egypt or back in Jordan or even Saudi. I don't really care. But we'll see what happens. I'm not trying to be morbid here, but it's one of the things you think about as a middle-aged immigrant. And because you just, you face your immortality every now and then, and you're going to want to plan. And my parents did have a plan, but they didn't have a plan at the same time. And but it is what it is. I hope this been entertaining for you guys. And if you would like me to talk more about more detailed, intimate memories in Saudi Arabia, I would love to share those stories with you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. And as a reminder, these episodes are uploaded every single Wednesday on the Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And also they are available for you to watch anywhere you are at any time as a YouTube video on the Greenwood Dental Partners YouTube channel. And if you like any of the content that we have shared with you so far, please let us know so we can continue with these series on the Mindset Mastery Moment platforms. So please like, share, and subscribe. That way you won't miss any episodes. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you next time. This is Slava, the Jordanian.